Hi, it's Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. Vancouver's best auto service experience, 18-time winners of Best Auto Repair in Vancouver. How are you doing, Bernie?
I'm doing very well.
So we're going to talk about a 2011 Mercedes 350 GLK. And there was a brakes problem. What was going on with this SUV?
Well, the client brought it in for some brake concerns. It was just the brakes didn't quite feel right, and we did a brake inspection on it. Found a few issues. Brake fluid was discolored and dirty and old, which is not untypical. The front pads and rotors were worn out, not metal on metal, but worn out. And also the brake caliper, they were sticking and wouldn't retract properly. The rear brakes were in pretty good shape for the time being, so they didn't need any service. But that's basically what we found. They needed new front brake pads, rotors, and calipers.
So are calipers a pretty frequent replacement on this car?
No, they're not. Actually, for Mercedes and a lot of European vehicles, we don't do calipers very often. They tend to be quite durable. I'd say, for all the Mercedes we work on, maybe 95% of the brake jobs don't require calipers. It's really once you get into the older models, once you 15, 20 years old, even some of those don't require any caliper replacements. And it's not an often replaced item anyways. Usually once you do a set of calipers, they last for a long time.
So this vehicle wasn't in that age category. Was it a really high mileage vehicle?
No, it wasn't. And kind of surprising that the calipers were actually sticking, but sometimes it does happen. We only had about 135,000 kilometers. That's pretty young. Not too many of them need calipers at that age, but nonetheless, it's not it's just something that needs to be done.
So what does a brake caliper actually do?
Well, let's have a look at some pictures and I'll explain that. Here's our nice GLK 350 2011, nice looking car, nice compact little sport utility vehicle. The brake caliper, you can actually see through the wheel here. There's each wheel has a caliper, and basically the function of the caliper is to squeeze the brake pad against the brake rotor. So there's a picture of the brakes with the nice new brake rotor. The rotor turns with the wheel. The brake pad sits in here. Now there's two pads, one on each side. You can only see the outboard pad, and this is the caliper, and this is actually the bracket of the caliper. So it's not a full picture of the caliper. Well, actually, this part here, this darker part, is actually the caliper bracket. It bolts to the steering knuckle, and the pads ride inside this bracket. And the caliper, this is the sort of outer part with the ears, squeezes the brake pads against the rotor when you apply the brake. And inside this area here, there are pretty certain this one, there's two pistons. And the pistons, once you press it, brake fluid forces the pistons against the pad, and that forces this part to compress and cause the pads to squeeze. So that's basically how a caliper works. As soon as you let the brake off, the pressure's released, and then the wheel's free to turn again. What goes wrong with calipers is the pistons will stick, moisture will get inside, the pistons will stick. There's also slider pieces inside this area here on top and bottom, and these pins will stick. Moisture, again, it's usually moisture gets in and attacks it and can ruin it. But also, dirty brake fluid can cause the pistons to seize from the inside. So that's basically the brake caliper explained.
So what would cause the brake fluid to get dirty?
Brake fluid is what's called a hygroscopic fluid. It actually absorbs water, and it absorbs water right out of the air. I thought at first that's kind of a bad thing, but actually there's a reason why it does that, and that is because if water wasn't absorbed into the fluid, it would accumulate in certain areas of the brakes. Like it would accumulate, like it was a, say, petroleum-based fluid, water would separate and it would accumulate in certain areas and cause rusting and corrosion. So the fact that the water is absorbed into the fluid is actually a good thing. And when you flush the fluid out, it gets rid of the water. The brake fluid, I mean, there's heat that takes place. There are lubricants that are put in at the factory inside the master cylinder and the caliper pistons, and these lubricants, I would say, break down, but they contaminate the fluid. And it's basically heat from the brakes that really contaminates the fluid, and moisture that just gets absorbed out of the air in the fluid. So it's good to flush brake fluid every 2 to 3 years on any car, unless I guess if you live in the Arizona desert or something and the car never leaves there, it could last longer. But as a general rule, if you own a car, flush the brake fluid every 2 to 3 years.
And I'm sure that that fluid running in the vehicle, it's hydraulic, so it's going to get pretty hot.
It does get very hot. It can get up to I think the boiling point for .4 brake fluid is somewhere around 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So, I mean, the other brake parts, I mean, you can't even touch a brake rotor. You can fry an egg on a brake rotor after stopping a few times. It's that hot. But I mean, it transfers into the fluid and it gets really hot. It'll be up a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit for sure. 200-300. You're going down some steep hills for a long period of time, you could be approaching 400 degrees for sure. So that's pretty hot.
And how are these GLKs for reliability?
They're good vehicles. They're not the most common Mercedes. I mean, we don't work on a ton of them compared to the MLs and which just seem to be a lot more common around this part of the world. But it's a nice little vehicle. It's a more compact sport utility than an ML or a GL. The Ks in Mercedes usually indicates it's a smaller version of a larger vehicle. Like the SLK is a smaller SL car, and the GLK is a smaller GL vehicle. But it's a nice sized vehicle, and reliability, they're pretty good. We don't really find much in the way of unusual problems with them.
So there you go. If you're looking for service for your Mercedes GL class vehicle in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 to book your appointment. They're busy. You have to book ahead. Or check out our website, pawlikautomotive.com, or our YouTube channel. Search for Pawlik Automotive. We've got hundreds of videos on there. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.